Hello and welcome to this session. Today's topic is Unit 1, Managing Human Resources, and I'm your tutor, Dharam Gopal. Now, before we go any further, let me make a recap of the introductory session. You will recall that during the introductory session, I mentioned that this program is a University of Mauritius MBA program, a high-level management education, training and development program. And the Human Resource Management module is part of the program. We presented to you the course outline, that is the module outlay. I also mentioned to you the teaching and learning methodology that will accompany this module. We will be involved in a learning journey, a partnership between yourself and myself. I also mentioned that you will have to design your own learning strategy. Why I mentioned that is because you all have many professional and social commitments, and there will inevitably be a pressure on your time. You'll have to do some very good time management, and also you'll have to provide time for reading the prescribed material, as well as material that will be prescribed as we go along. Now, before we start discussing the content of Unit 1, let us have a look at the arrangement of the material, because I will be proposing to you a minor rearrangement which will facilitate your reading and understanding of the material. Let's take a look at the learning material. In the table of contents, you'll find the overview section. Then you will have the material organized as will be shown in the next slide. The other topics will appear on this slide. Now, I'm proposing a rearrangement so that the unit will be in 4 parts. The first part will deal with the historical antecedents of HRM and the definition of HRM. I will also be mentioning the personnel management function, and reference will be made to John Story's 27 points of differences. The next part will deal with the HR activities, roles and objectives of HRM, and the soft and hard versions of HRM. The third part will focus on the changing HR function and the contemporary HRM model. And the fourth part will deal with the link between HRM and strategy, that is HRM and organizational strategy. And we shall end with a summary of Unit 1. In essence, therefore, Topic 1 will be subdivided into 4 subtopics. Subtopic 1 will deal with historical evolution and meaning of HRM. Subtopic 2 will deal with HRM activities, objectives, roles, and models. Subtopic 3 will deal with the changing HRM function, and subtopic 4 will deal with HRM and strategy, that is, HRM and organizational strategy. As I mentioned earlier, I have made this rearrangement to facilitate your reading and understanding of the material. Let's take a look at the overview and see the main points which are mentioned. The first point which is mentioned is that HRM is a critical function for organizational performance and success. The second point which is mentioned is that HRM is a strategic activity. That is, HRM is expected to make a direct contribution to the realization of organizational strategy. And the third point which is mentioned is the link between HRM and organizational strategy. As you will see yourself as we continue with the discussions, that the link between HRM and organizational strategy is becoming stronger and tighter. Now, if you examine these 3 points, there is a message. The message is that HRM, Human Resource Management, which deals with employment relationships in organizations, the relationships between management and employees, it is undergoing a transformation. And there are a number of forces. These forces can be external or internal to the organization, which are impacting on human resource management. Now, to enable you to focus on the changes that are taking place, I'm proposing to you a warm-up activity. Now, you will see that these forces are moving personnel management away from its traditional approach to a more modern approach, which is now known as human resource management. So let us come to the warm-up activity. For this warm-up activity, you will have to use a tool known as the PESTEL tool. And I've given you a website which you can consult to get more information about the PESTEL tool. The activity I'm proposing to you is to list the external forces influencing HRM practices. And secondly, we'll also have to make brief comments on how each force is influencing HRM practices. Now, as you will reflect and explore the changes which are impacting on HRM, and maybe you will also be reading some of the literature on HRM, you will have to pay attention to a number of aspects. First, you will have to consider whether traditional personnel management is being replaced by HRM. Secondly, is HRM a new approach to managing people in organizations? Or is it a case of old wine in new bottle? This is a phrase you will come across when you read textbooks, articles on human resource management. Thirdly, you will also have to consider whether HRM is an exact science and that it can be implemented in all organizations. Now, as you consider these issues, you will see that HRM has often been a subject of debate and controversy. Now, HRM became recognized as a new concept, a new way of managing people in organizations in the 1980s. And now, as you know, several decades have gone by, and we are now in the 21st century. It is now a fact that HRM has become an established discipline. It is considered to be a distinct, innovative, improved way of managing people in organizations. It represents a movement from a system of employee exploitation to a system of employee engagement and involvement in organizations. So from the 1980s, where HRM became acknowledged, recognized, we are now in the 21st century, and now the field is more and more known as strategic human resource management. Let us take a look at the historical antecedents of HRM. That is, how the function was managed in the past, especially in the days of the Industrial Revolution. Relations between management and employees were often qualified as being a we and they relations. It was a we and they equation. What it meant is that the interests of management and employees were always conflicting. There was a war between the interests of management and interests of employees, which gave rise to a lot of conflicts and strained relations between management and employees. The system of managing employees was very rudimentary. It amounted to hiring people, paying people, and when they were no more needed, to firing people or retiring them. Popularly, the system was known as a system of hire and fire. The relations between management and employees was considered to be very transactional. Now, if we take a look at how the system of employment relation was organized in the past, especially during the days of the Industrial Revolution, we see that there was no formal HRM department. The HRM activity, such as hiring, was carried out by gangmasters, that is, job contractors. Pay was set by labor market, and many functions were delegated to supervisors and foremen of plants. The function was heavily centralized, and the centralization of employment concerned hiring, compensation, and record keeping. However, following the two world wars, in particular after 1945, the term personnel administration started replacing the term welfare work and employment management, and personnel departments were gradually established and formalized. There were also a number of gradual improvements which were brought to the practice of employment relationships in those days. For example, in the USA, and in many parts of Europe, there were industrial welfare programs which were introduced. Initiatives such as availability of lunchrooms, medical care, or libraries to employees was quite common. Now, this was inspired by some humanitarian and religious principles which were advocated by social reformers, religious organizations, trade unions, as well as enlightened managers and owners of enterprises. We can say that it was a form of employee welfarism which was being practiced. The other important development that we have to consider relates to the schools of management. These were research findings and insights which provided new perspectives in the management of people in work organizations. There are four schools of management, namely the scientific management, the human relations management school, the behavioral science school, and the strategic management school. Now, these schools of management influence significantly the management of workers, employees in organization. The change, the belief that was held in the past about the nature of work. In the past, the work was considered to be a necessary evil which employees would prefer to avoid. But the insight which was put forward indicated that work could be considered as fulfilling, and workers would enjoy the work if the proper conditions were created. The second insight related to beliefs about human nature. In the past, it was believed that people were irresponsible and would not like to assume responsibilities. The new insight showed that people were responsible and would assume responsibilities if the proper conditions were created. And thirdly, managerial attitudes as far as work and human nature was concerned also went through important changes as a result of insights that were derived from these schools of management. At this point, I would recommend that you read about the different schools of management and try to see what were the important findings, the important messages as far as the nature of work is concerned, as far as the nature of human beings is concerned, and as far as the attitude or the change of attitudes and behaviors in managers or in management professionals is concerned. We can, at this point, summarize the historical evolution that we have reviewed in this diagram. The wave 1 would represent the early phase of personnel management. The wave 2 would represent the post-1945 status of personnel management. And wave 3 would represent the post-1980s status of HRM. And wave 4 would be the contemporary situation, that is, the strategic human resource management orientation to employment relationships. Let us now see a definition of human resource management. As you will realize when you read on human resource management, there are as many definitions as there are writers on human resource management. Let us take a look at one of the definitions that you will come across in textbooks. This is by John Story. Now, John Story defines human resource management as a distinctive approach to employment management which seeks to achieve competitive advantage. This is a very important concept. That is, it helps organizations to be better than their competitors through the strategic deployment of a highly committed and capable workforce using an integrated array of cultural, structural, and personnel techniques. So, human resource management is therefore an innovative approach which uses different techniques, different tools in an integrated manner so that we can create conditions for a highly committed and capable workforce. Now, let us contrast this definition with a definition of personnel management. It goes like this. The term personnel management has traditionally been used to denote the area of managerial activity, or most usually a distinct department which is principally concerned with administering the workforce, for example, in respect of payroll and contractual issues, providing training, ensuring legal compliance, for example, in the area of health and safety and anti-discrimination legislation, and managing collective industrial relations between the firm and trade unions. In a sense, it means that personnel management is concerned with the administration of what is known as a legal contract. Whereas human resource management does not stop with a legal contract. It also takes on board what is known as the psychological contract. I would at this stage recommend you to look up for the meaning of psychological contract. So, if we come back to the definition of human resource management, we have to ask the question whether human resource management is positioned as a strategic activity. Remember the term competitive advantage, and with the application of a human resource management orientation, organizations are in a position to achieve competitive advantage. Now, for that to happen, human resource management has to be a strategic function, and it has to operate as a business function. That is, getting involved in the definition and implementation of organizational strategies. As you will understand, a strategy is the overall direction and purpose of an organization. So HRM is assumed to be a strategic business function. That is, there is a link between the HRM function and the organizational strategy. Now, let us take a look at the HRM activities, objectives, roles, and models. Now, in this diagram, you have a list of activities which are normally carried out by the HR department. These activities are namely human resource planning, recruiting human resources, selecting and placing human resources, performance management, the management of incentives, training and development, career planning and development, managing labor relations, managing work environment, managing diverse workforce, and managing new employment relationships. Now, this is a list of activities, and we shall be examining many of these activities in the course of our future discussions. But let me underline one important fact, that along with these activities, there are also a number of processes which are important for the function of human resource management. We can say that a process is a change program. Let me illustrate to you what we mean by an HRM process. For example, change management. This is a process, and this is a very important process in the context of human resource management. The environment of organization is changing. We are now in a global environment. And when we look back to the activity I propose, you will see that there are a number of forces which are influencing the HRM function. So change is an important issue for human resource managers. Therefore, alongside the activities like human resource planning, recruiting, selecting employees, they will also have to carry out a number of HR processes, for example, change management, for example, team building, for example, conflict management. So these are processes that are important in the function of human resource management. Now, let us look at the objectives which we pursue in human resource management, as well as the roles that are expected of human resource managers. If we look at this diagram, you will see that there are a number of objectives which have been mentioned. First, you have the staffing objectives, that is acquiring the human resources, performance objectives, ensuring that they perform at a high level, they produce superior performance, administration objectives, that is ensuring that employees are trained, employees are paid, employees are provided training programs. These are typical administrative objectives. And as I mentioned to you, there are also a number of processes, and one of them is change management. So these are the objectives which are normally pursued in human resource management. As regards the roles of human resource management, now we have to consider that human resource management is a shared responsibility. That is, the HR specialist is expected to work with line managers, operational managers, because human resource management, the philosophy of human resource management is that it is a shared responsibility, in which case you have to involve, as you will see in the diagram, line managers, human resource generalists, and subcontractors, that is, those who provide certain services to the organization must also know about the human resource policies and practices of the organization. You also have consultants and advisors who can be uh, brought in whenever the need will arise. And of course, you have the human resource specialists. So, as I said, human resource management is a shared responsibility, and there are different people who will be involved, who will have to assume the roles of HR. Now, let us look at the soft and hard version of HRM. Earlier on, I mentioned that there are as many definitions of HRM as there are writers, authors. Similarly, for the practice of HRM, there is no such thing as one size fits all. That is, we can adopt one way, one model of managing HRM and apply it to all organizations. Now, there are many models, but we will be considering the two popular models. The first one is known as the Michigan model, and the second model is known as the Harvard model. Essentially, the Michigan model is a model where the organizational strategy is decided by top management with the assistance of HR specialists. And once the strategy has been defined, decided, then the employees will be involved in the execution, the implementation of that strategy. So we can say that the Michigan model is more a directive strategy. That is, it is top management driven. Now, the Harvard model is considered to be a more participative, democratic approach to managing human resources. Essentially, it means that we have to take into consideration a number of factors when defining HR policies and practices. And if you take a look at a diagram of the model, you will see that the two important factors that we have to take into account are first, the situational factors, that is, the environmental conditions, the political, economic, legal, social conditions, and the stakeholders, the various stakeholders which constitute of the investors, the managers, the employees, the suppliers, and other contractors, subcontractors who relate with organizations. Now, the Harvard model is considered to be a participative model in contrast to the Michigan model, which is more of a directive model. Let us now come to the changing function of HRM. We have to look at the function of HRM as a dynamic function. That is, there are always new ideas, new concepts which are being developed and which are influencing the orientation of HRM. Now, with regard to the changing HRM function, we have to refer to the interesting work carried out by Dave Ulrich. Dave Ulrich has proposed that HR specialists and managers will have to carry out a number of roles. The role is an expected behavior. And there are a number of roles which, according to Dave Ulrich, HR specialists, HR managers will have to carry out. Let us take a look at the 4 important roles that HR managers are expected to carry out. If you look at the diagram, you will see that you have a role as strategic partner, a role as administrative expert, a role as employee champion, and a role as change agent. So according to Dave Ulrich, HR managers will have to undertake day-to-day operational functions, namely to be knowledgeable about all the administrative functions like recruitment, selection, training, performance management, and also be the spokesperson of employees. As regards being a strategic partner and change agent, we have already referred to these roles previously. Now, the HRM model, that is, what is the paradigm which should guide HR managers, HR practitioners. This is a paradigm, or we can say a framework, which has been developed by John Story. I referred to John Story's 27 points of differences earlier. Now, John Story has proposed that there are 4 dimensions in the paradigm that should guide HR professionals, HR managers. The first dimension relates to beliefs and assumptions. What it means is that managers should believe in the potential of employees. Basically, it means that people should be considered as valuable assets, and that the possibility of improving their performance, the productivity, should be a starting point. That is, this should be a guiding principle for HR managers and practitioners. The second dimension is strategy. That is, HR managers need to work closely with top management in defining organizational strategies. And they must involve the line managers in the implementation of HR policies and practices. Strategic also implies that the HR function should be able to make a direct contribution to organizational outcomes. That is, add to improving customer value. That is the reason why today there is the need to measure the contribution that HR makes to organizational performance and success. The third dimension relates to line management. That is, HR is a shared function. Line managers should work with HR specialists as a team. So teamwork is important. This is the third dimension, the involvement of line managers. And the fourth dimension, that is key levels. These are the various HR activities and functions. And it is recommended that these functions are carried out in an integrated manner, not in an isolated fragmented manner. So this is the model which is proposed. This is the paradigm, I would say, which is proposed by John Story. And once again, I will mention to you that you can go to John Story's 27 points of differences to obtain more details about the various points that have been mentioned in Story's 27 points of difference. We are now coming to the last part of the presentation, which is the link between HR and organizational strategy. Now, we have already mentioned that the link between HR and organizational strategy is becoming tighter and stronger. And this is happening in two ways. Take a look at this diagram. You will see that the different HR activities and processes which are mentioned at the top in the diagram, and the arrow indicates that all these activities and processes should be integrated. That is, they should be considered in a coherent and integrated manner. This is what we call the vertical integration of HR functions and processes. And we also need to ensure that there is what we call the horizontal, the vertical integration. At the top, this is the horizontal integration, and at the bottom, it is the vertical integration, which means that the HR, the business strategy, and the corporate strategy should be closely linked. Now, if we have the horizontal integration of HR activities and processes combined with the vertical integration of HR, business strategy, and corporate strategy, this will provide the perspective of how HR and organizational strategy should be handled. That is, there should be a very close link between the HR function and the strategic management function of organizations. Now, this is the link between HR and strategy. And that is the reason why the stronger the link, the tighter the link, the perspective of HR management takes an orientation which is known as strategic human resource management. That is, the organization in its activities, in its plans and strategies, it ensures that there is a close collaboration between top management and the HR function of the organization. So we have now come to the end of the presentation, and in summary, we have, during the course of this presentation, tried to provide answers to a number of issues. For example, we should be in a position now to respond to an issue as to what is HRM and what is personnel management. We've also taken a look at the activities of HRM, both the activities and the processes. We examine the objectives, the roles of HR managers, and the two models, namely Michigan and Harvard model. And lastly, we also consider how the HR function links with the organizational strategy. We have come to the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.